When you think about World War II, you think of these huge epic battles with really clear lines drawn in the sand. But there's one story from the very last days of the war that is so strange, so unbelievable, it almost sounds like it was made up for a movie. Yep, you heard that right. For one short, absolutely desperate moment, soldiers who had been trying to kill each other for years put all that aside, aimed their rifles in the same direction, and fought together against a common enemy. So the big question is, how? How in the world does that happen? Well, the answer involves a medieval castle, a bunch of VIP prisoners, and a few soldiers who decided that their shared humanity was more important than their uniforms. Let's dive in. Okay, so to really get how American GIs and German soldiers ended up defending a castle together, we first have to paint a picture of Germany in the spring of 1945. The whole country was just coming apart, total chaos. The Third Reich was basically in its death throes. You've got the Allied armies storming in from the west, the Soviets from the east, but inside the German military itself, this massive split was happening. It really wasn't one army anymore. It was more like two completely different mindsets wearing the same uniform. And this right here, this is the key to the entire story. On one side, you had the Wehrmacht, the regular army. A lot of these guys were totally disillusioned. They knew the war was over and just wanted to stop the pointless bloodshed. But on the other side, you had the Waffen-SS. These guys were hardcore fanatics who would literally fight to the last bullet and execute anyone, even their own, who tried to surrender. This internal war was about to set the stage for something incredible. So let's shift gears and talk about the location, because this whole thing didn't go down on some typical battlefield. It happened at a medieval castle high up in the Austrian Alps. And its real value wasn't its thick stone walls, but who was locked up inside. So this is Castle Itter. The SS had turned it into a special kind of prison, basically a high-security holding pen for some of the most famous and important political figures they'd captured in France. These weren't just any prisoners. They were incredibly valuable hostages. And just look at this list of who was locked up there. We're talking about two former prime ministers of France, Paul Reynaud and Edouard Daladier, two former commanders-in-chief of the entire French military. You've even got a world-famous tennis star and the son of a World War I hero. The amount of political capital inside that castle was just immense. And with the Third Reich collapsing, these prisoners were becoming a huge problem for the SS. So you've got this ticking clock, right? American forces are getting closer by the hour. The SS guards at the castle know the end is near. And what they do next kicks off this unbelievable chain of events, all because one German officer made a very brave choice. On May 4th, the SS guards just bail. They flee the castle. But this doesn't mean the prisoners are free. Oh no, it means they're in more danger than ever, because now they're sitting ducks for any roaming SS death squads. But a local Wehrmacht officer, Major Josef Gangl, who was already disgusted with the Nazi regime, hears about their situation. He knows his little group of guys can't possibly defend the castle, so he decides to do something absolutely insane. Major Gangl gets in a vehicle, puts up a white flag, and drives out specifically to find the American army. He finds a unit led by a Captain Jack Lee and literally begs for help. He chose his conscience over his orders, asking his enemy to help him fight his own countrymen to save these prisoners. And Captain Lee, he actually said yes. In a move that was completely against his own orders, a massive personal risk, he gathered a tiny little force. And just like that, the stage was set for one of the most surreal battles of the entire war. The siege of Castle Itter was on. And this chart just lays out how bonkers the whole thing was. The defenders were this wild mix of about 25 people. A handful of American GIs, about 10 of Major Gangl's German soldiers, and even the French VIPs who were now armed and ready to fight. They had one single Sherman tank they called Bessie. And who were they up against? About 150 hardened Waffen-SS troops. The odds were just impossible. So at dawn on May 5th, the SS attacks, and they hit the castle with everything they have. That lone tank, Bessie, was absolutely critical, holding down the main gate. But eventually, it took a direct hit from an anti-tank gun and was knocked out. With the gate now exposed, the fighting got really desperate. And right in the middle of that chaos, Major Gangl, the German officer who started this whole rescue, was shot by a sniper while trying to move the French prime minister to safety. He was killed instantly. Just think about that image for a second. a German army major gives his life to save a French prime minister from SS fanatics, all while fighting side by side with American soldiers. It's a moment that just completely shatters the simple narratives we tell ourselves about war. So now the defenders are almost out of ammunition. The SS is getting ready for their final, overwhelming push. This whole bizarre alliance is literally moments away from being completely wiped out. And then, at the last possible second, like something straight out of a movie, reinforcements show up. A larger American force from the 142nd Infantry Regiment had gotten Captain Lee's radio calls for help, and they broke through the SS lines. The attackers scattered, the castle was secured, and the prisoners were finally, truly safe. So burn that date into your memory, May 5th, 1945, the day that American GIs and German Wehrmacht soldiers fought and died together. Now look at this date, May 7th, 1945. This is the day Germany signed the official unconditional surrender. That means this completely insane battle happened just 2 days before the war in Europe was officially over. 2 days. And really, that's the whole point of this story, isn't it? The Battle of Castle Itter is this tiny, weird footnote in the history of a gigantic war, but it's so powerful. It's proof that even in the middle of the most brutal conflict imaginable, those lines we draw between us and them can sometimes just disappear. It leaves us with this really big question to chew on. In the heat of battle, when you're faced with a clear moral choice, when does the uniform stop mattering? The handful of men at Castle Itter, they found their answer.